What if I told you that a company started in a small garage, eventually became worth more than $3 trillion? That's more valuable than the economies of many countries. Today, over 2 billion Apple devices are used around the world. Millions of people line up for hours just to buy Apple's newest products. But here's the real question. How did Apple build this incredible business? Was it just because they made great iPhones? Or is there a hidden business strategy that turned a small startup into one of the most valuable companies in history? In this video, we'll uncover Apple's complete journey from two friends building computers in a garage to creating a company that changed technology forever. Along the way, you'll discover the smart decisions, risky moments, and business strategies that made Apple a global giant. So sit back and let's begin the incredible story of how Apple became a $3 trillion company. Chapter 1: The beginning of Apple, 1976. Before Apple became a company worth $3 trillion, it was just a dream shared by two young friends who believed computers could change the world. Back in the 1970s, computers were completely different from what we use today. They were huge, expensive, and mainly used by large companies, universities, and government organizations. For an ordinary person, owning a computer was almost impossible. In fact, most people didn't even think they needed one. But two friends saw a future that no one else could see. Their names were Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Steve Wozniak was a brilliant engineer who loved designing computers. He enjoyed solving technical problems and building new machines. Steve Jobs, on the other hand, wasn't the engineer. His greatest strength was his vision. He believed technology should be simple, beautiful, and easy for everyone to use. Together they made the perfect team. In 1976, they decided to start their own company. They didn't have a large office. They didn't have thousands of employees. They didn't even have millions of dollars. Instead, they started working from the garage of Steve Jobs' parents' house in California. That small garage would later become one of the most famous garages in business history. The company's name was Apple Computer. Many people have wondered why they chose the name Apple. The reason is surprisingly simple. Steve Jobs liked the name because it sounded friendly, simple, and easy to remember. It was also different from the complicated names used by many technology companies at the time. Their first product was called the Apple I. Compared to today's computers, it was very basic. It didn't come with a monitor, keyboard, or case. Customers had to add those parts themselves. Even so, the Apple I was an important step because it made personal computing more accessible than many other machines available at the time. Soon, a local computer store placed an order for 50 Apple I computers. For a tiny startup working from a garage, this was a huge opportunity. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak worked day and night to complete the order. They assembled every computer by hand. When they successfully delivered all 50 computers, they proved something very important. There were people willing to buy personal computers. But Apple's real breakthrough came in 1977 with the launch of the Apple Roman II. Unlike the Apple I, it was much easier to use. It came assembled, supported color graphics, and was designed for everyday people, not just computer experts. Families, schools, and small businesses started buying it. Sales grew rapidly. Within a few years, Apple transformed from a small garage startup into one of the fastest growing technology companies in America. The impossible dream was starting to become reality, but success also brought new challenges. As Apple became bigger, competition increased, internal conflicts began to grow, and the company entered one of the most difficult periods in its history. In the next chapter, we'll see how Apple went from incredible success to the brink of failure, and why Steve Jobs was forced to leave the company he created. Chapter 2: Apple's biggest crisis. By the early 1980s, Apple was one of the fastest growing technology companies in the world. The success of the Apple Roman II had made the company famous. In 1980, Apple became a public company by selling its shares on the stock market. The company's value grew rapidly, and many early employees became millionaires almost overnight. Everything seemed perfect. But behind the scenes, Apple was facing serious problems. Other technology companies, especially IBM and Microsoft, were becoming stronger. IBM introduced its own personal computer, and Microsoft provided the operating system for many different computer brands. Unlike Apple, which only made its own computers, Microsoft allowed many companies to use its software. As a result, Windows computers quickly became more common and more affordable. Apple was slowly losing its advantage. Inside the company, another problem was growing. Steve Jobs had big ideas and wanted Apple to move faster. Many executives believed his expectations were too demanding. These disagreements created tension inside the company. In 1983, Apple hired a new CEO named John Sculley. Steve Jobs believed Sculley would help Apple grow even faster. At first, they worked well together, but soon they began arguing over the future of the company. Steve Jobs wanted to take bold risks and create revolutionary products. Scully wanted to focus on stability and profits. The conflict became so serious that Apple's board of directors had to choose between them. In 1990 and 85, the board supported John Scully. Steve Jobs lost his leadership role. Soon after, he made one of the hardest decisions of his life. He left Apple, the very company he had started in his parents' garage. Imagine creating a company from nothing and then being forced to leave it. For Steve Jobs, it was a painful moment. After Jobs left, Apple continued making computers, but something was missing. The company launched many different products, but most failed to impress customers. Its product lineup became confusing. Innovation slowed down. Meanwhile, Microsoft Windows computers became more popular every year because they were available from many different manufacturers and often cost less. By the mid-1990s, Apple was in serious trouble. Sales were falling. Profits were shrinking. The company was losing money. Some experts even believed Apple would soon go bankrupt or be bought by another company. It seemed impossible that Apple could ever become one of the world's biggest businesses. But sometimes the greatest comeback begins when everything seems lost. And that's exactly what happened next. In the next chapter, we'll see how Steve Jobs returned to Apple, transformed the struggling company, and started one of the greatest business comebacks in history. Chapter 3: The Return of Steve Jobs, Apple's Greatest Comeback. By 1997, Apple was in its worst financial condition. The company was losing money. Sales were falling. Customers were choosing Windows computers instead of Macs. Many experts believed Apple had only a few months left before it would go bankrupt. It looked like the end of Apple. But then something unexpected happened. Steve Jobs came back. Interestingly, Apple didn't directly hire Steve Jobs again. A few years after leaving Apple, Jobs had started another company called NeXT. In 1996, Apple bought NeXT because it needed better software. As part of the deal, Steve Jobs returned to Apple. At first, he was only an advisor, but within a year he became Apple's leader once again. When Jobs looked around the company, he noticed a big problem. Apple was making too many products. There were dozens of computers with confusing names. Even customers didn't know which one to buy. Steve Jobs believes that Apple didn't need more products. It needed better products. So he made a bold decision. He cancelled nearly 70% of Apple's products. Many employees were shocked. Some thought he was making a huge mistake. But Jobs wanted the company to focus on only a few excellent products instead of many average ones. His philosophy was simple. Focus on quality, not quantity. Next, he improved Apple's design. He believed technology shouldn't just work well, it should also look beautiful. In 1998, Apple launched the iMac. Unlike the boring, grey computers that were common at the time, the iMac had a colourful, modern design. It was easy to set up and easy to use. People loved it. The iMac became a huge success and brought customers back to Apple. But Steve Jobs knew one successful computer wasn't enough. He wanted Apple to become more than just a computer company. He wanted Apple to create products that people would use every single day. That vision would soon change not only Apple, but the entire technology industry. In the next chapter, we'll see how the iPod and iTunes transformed the music industry and gave Apple a whole new way to make billions of dollars. Chapter 4: The iPod Revolution. Apple changes music forever. After the success of the iMac, Apple was finally back on its feet. But Steve Jobs wasn't satisfied. He knew that selling computers alone wouldn't make Apple one of the world's biggest companies. He wanted Apple to become part of people's everyday lives. At the beginning of the 2000s, music players were becoming popular. People carried CDs or MP3 players to listen to their favorite songs. The problem was that most MP3 players were slow, confusing, and could store only a small number of songs. Steve Jobs saw an opportunity. He believed Apple could create something much better. In 2001, Apple introduced the iPod. Its slogan was simple but powerful: 1,000 songs in your pocket. At that time, this sounded unbelievable. The iPod was small, stylish, easy to use, and could store far more music than most other players. People loved it. Sales grew rapidly, and the iPod became one of the most popular music players in the world. But Apple didn't stop there. Steve Jobs realized that people also needed an easier way to buy music legally. So, in 2003, Apple launched the iTunes Store. Instead of buying an entire music album, customers could purchase just one song for a small price. This was a huge change for the music industry. Artists earned money, customers got the songs they wanted, and Apple earned a share from every purchase. This was one of Apple's smartest business decisions. The company wasn't just selling a device anymore, it was creating an entire ecosystem. If you owned an iPod, iTunes made it simple to buy and organize your music. And because everything worked so well together, customers stayed with Apple. This strategy became one of the biggest reasons for Apple's long-term success. The more Apple products and services people used, the harder it became to leave the Apple ecosystem. By the mid-2000s, millions of iPods had been sold around the world. Apple was making billions of dollars.
But Steve Jobs believed there was an even bigger opportunity waiting.
He looked at another device that almost everyone carried every day: the mobile phone. At that time, phones were mainly used for calling and texting. Some had tiny screens, physical keyboards, and very limited internet access.
Steve Jobs believed phones could become much smarter.
He wanted to combine a phone, a music player, and an internet device into one product. Many people thought it was too risky, but Steve Jobs was about to introduce a product that would completely change the smartphone industry and take Apple to a level no one had ever imagined. In the next chapter, we'll see how the launch of the iPhone transformed Apple from a successful technology company into one of the most valuable businesses in history. It was January 9, 2007. People from around the world were watching Apple CEO Steve Jobs as he walked onto the stage for one of the most important product launches in history. Nobody knew they were about to witness a moment that would change technology forever. Steve Jobs smiled and said, "Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone." At first, many people were confused. He continued by saying that Apple was introducing 3 revolutionary products. The first was a widescreen iPod with touch controls. The second was a revolutionary mobile phone. And the third was a breakthrough internet communication device. The audience started clapping. Then Steve Jobs repeated the same 3 products again: a widescreen iPod, a mobile phone, an internet communicator. Then he smiled and said, "These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device, and we are calling it iPhone." The audience erupted with excitement. At the time, most mobile phones had small screens, physical keyboards, and limited internet access. The iPhone was completely different. It had a large touchscreen. It allowed users to browse the internet, listen to music, watch videos, take photos, and make phone calls all from a single device. It felt like carrying a small computer in your pocket. Many experts believed the iPhone would fail. Some said it was too expensive. Others believed people would never give up physical keyboards. But customers thought differently. When the iPhone went on sale, long lines formed outside Apple stores. People waited for hours just to buy one. The iPhone quickly became one of the best-selling products in the world. But Apple had an even bigger surprise. In 2008, the company launched the App Store. For the first time, developers from around the world could create apps for the iPhone. There were apps for games, education, photography, shopping, fitness, banking, and much more. Suddenly, the iPhone became more than just a phone. It became a platform where millions of people could do almost everything from one device. Apple also earned a percentage of many purchases made through the App Store. This created a new source of income that continued to grow year after year. As more people bought iPhones, more developers created apps. And as more apps became available, even more people wanted to buy an iPhone. This powerful cycle helped Apple stay ahead of its competitors. Every new iPhone brought better cameras, faster performance, improved battery life, and exciting new features. Customers didn't just buy an iPhone once. Many upgraded every few years. This gave Apple a steady stream of revenue and helped build one of the strongest customer bases in the world. The iPhone soon became Apple's biggest business.
It generated hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue and transformed Apple from a successful computer company into a global technology giant.
But even with the incredible success of the iPhone, Apple had another secret. The company wasn't just selling products. It was building a business where customers kept coming back again and again. In the next chapter, we'll uncover the real secret behind Apple's billions of dollars, the power of its brand, premium pricing, loyal customers, and the Apple ecosystem. Chapter 6: The Secret Behind Apple's Billions. By now, Apple had become one of the most recognizable companies in the world. Millions of people owned iPhones. The iPad, Mac, Apple Watch, and AirPods were also becoming more popular every year. But here's something surprising. Apple wasn't always the company that sold the most smartphones. In many years, Android phones sold more units than iPhones.
So if Apple wasn't always selling the most phones, how was it making so much money?
The answer lies in Apple's business strategy.
Premium pricing.
Apple doesn't try to be the cheapest. Instead, it focuses on making products that people see as premium. Think about it. When a new iPhone launches, many people are willing to pay over $1,000 for it. Why? Because they believe they are getting quality, reliability, great performance, and years of software updates. Apple has built a brand that people trust. And when customers trust a brand, they are often willing to pay more. The Apple ecosystem. But Apple's biggest strength isn't just the iPhone. It's something called the Apple ecosystem. Imagine you buy an iPhone. Later, you decide to buy AirPods.
They connect instantly.
Then you buy an Apple Watch. It automatically syncs with your iPhone. Later, you buy a MacBook.
Now your photos, messages, notes, and files appear on every device without you doing much. Everything works together smoothly.
This creates a simple and convenient experience. Because of this, many customers continue buying Apple products instead of switching to another brand. Services money that keeps coming in.
Apple also realized that selling hardware wasn't enough, so the company expanded into services.
Today, Apple earns money from
The App Store,
Apple Music,
iCloud storage, Apple TV Plus, Apple Pay, Apple Care.
millions of people pay monthly subscriptions for these services. That means Apple doesn't just earn money when someone buys an iPhone. It continues earning money month after month.
This is called recurring revenue, and it's one of the strongest business models in the world.
Customer loyalty.
Another reason for Apple's success is customer loyalty. Many iPhone users upgrade to another iPhone when it's time for a new phone.
Many Mac users buy another Mac.
The same happens with Apple Watches and AirPods.
This creates a cycle where customers keep returning to Apple.
For most companies, finding new customers is expensive. Apple has millions of loyal customers who come back on their own.
That's a huge advantage. The result,
By combining premium products,
a strong ecosystem, recurring services, and loyal customers, Apple built a business that earns billions of dollars every year.
it wasn't just selling technology.
It was creating an experience that people wanted to stay with. And this strategy helped Apple become one of the most profitable companies in history.
But one final question remains.
How did all of this help Apple reach an unbelievable market value of $3 trillion? Let's find out in the next chapter.
Chapter 7: How Apple reached a $3 trillion valuation.
By the early 2020s, Apple was no longer just a technology company.
It had become one of the most powerful businesses in the world.
Every year, Apple sold millions of iPhones, Macs,
iPads, Apple Watches, and AirPods.
At the same time, its services like the App Store, iCloud, Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, and Apple Pay continued generating billions of dollars. This combination of products and services made Apple's business stronger than ever. But what does it actually mean when people say Apple is worth $3 trillion?
It doesn't mean Apple has $3 trillion sitting in a bank account.
Instead, it refers to Apple's market value, also called market capitalization.
Here's a simple example.
Imagine a company has 100 shares, and each share is worth $10.
The company's total market value would be
100 shares times $10 equals $1,000. Now imagine a company has billions of shares, and investors are willing to pay a high price for each one because they believe the company will keep growing.
That's exactly what happened with Apple.
As Apple continued making huge profits and launching successful products, investors became more confident in its future. More people wanted to buy Apple stock. As demand for the stock increased, its share price also increased.
Over time, Apple's total market value crossed $1 trillion, then $2 trillion, and eventually $3 trillion, making it one of the first companies in history to reach that incredible milestone.
But Apple didn't achieve this because of just one product. It was the result of decades of smart decisions.
The company focused on innovation.
It built products that people love.
It created an ecosystem that kept customers coming back.
It expanded into services that generated recurring income.
And it built one of the strongest brands in the world.
Today, when millions of people think about smartphones, laptops, smartwatches, or wireless earbuds, Apple is often one of the first names that comes to mind.
That level of trust is something money alone cannot buy.
Apple earned it over many years by consistently delivering products that customers enjoyed using.
Of course, Apple still faces challenges.
Competition is stronger than ever.
Technology is changing rapidly, and customer expectations continue to grow.
But Apple's ability to adapt and innovate has helped it remain one of the world's leading companies.
So what can we learn from Apple's incredible journey?
Let's wrap everything up in the conclusion.
Conclusion:
The story behind Apple's success.
So how did Apple become a $3 trillion company? It wasn't because of one product.
It wasn't because of one lucky decision. And it definitely didn't happen overnight.
Apple's
journey began in a
small garage with two friends who believed that technology could make people's lives better. Along the way, the company experienced incredible success, painful failures, and even came close to bankruptcy. Steve Jobs was forced to leave the company he co-founded.
But instead of giving up, he returned years later and helped lead one of the greatest business comebacks in history.
Apple then introduced products that changed the world, like the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, the Apple Watch, and the AirPods.
But the real secret behind Apple's success wasn't just creating great products.
It was creating an entire ecosystem where all of its devices and services worked together seamlessly.
This made customers happy and kept them coming back.
Apple also built one of the strongest brands in the world by focusing on quality, innovation, and a simple user experience.
These smart business decisions helped Apple earn the trust of millions of customers and the confidence of investors. That's how a company that started in a small garage grew into one of the most valuable businesses in history.
And Apple's story teaches us an important lesson. Great companies aren't built in a day. They are built through innovation, consistency, smart decisions, and the courage to keep going even when things don't go as planned. Who knows, the next billion-dollar or even trillion-dollar idea could be sitting in someone's garage right now. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new, please like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more simple and animated videos about business, money, technology, and the world's biggest companies. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next video.
Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.